And we're talking today with Mike Gillette, the creator of the Strength Psychology program. Mike, you are a guy who I've definitely wanted to talk to for a very long time. Definitely a kindred spirit, and I've seen the stuff you do and how you do it, and it's inspiring to me. And I want to kind of get a little bit of background for everybody watching this to kind of get an idea of where you started training, why you started training, your military background, law enforcement, etc. So yeah, give us a little background and insight into how you got started.
Okay, Nick. I didn't really start becoming a physical person until I had decided to go into the military. I'd grown up very small, weak, wasn't really engaged in the world of competitive athletics at all. And prior to departing for the Army, it dawned on me that it might be a good idea to prepare myself physically. And I kind of went from 0 to 60 with all of that. I went from being very non-physical to training at a gym. I started training martial arts and was really looking towards the specific physical requirements, the types of things that I knew I was going to be tested on a regular basis in the military, and really started to focus on those things. So it was not something that was recreational. It was not something that just seemed like it would be a fun thing to do. It was very much driven by wanting to do well in this new chapter of my life. Once I got into the military, I was really kind of captivated by how competitive it was, in the sense that whatever kind of a person you are, in the military, there's a place for that. From somebody who's just wants to do a good job on whatever their military day job might be, there's places just for those people to focus on that. For people who serve in combat arms specialties, then there are sort of varying degrees of intensity, if you will. However far you want to take yourself, there's a place for you to call home, or a place for you to aspire to call home. Now, I had gone into the military really to get money for college. So I went in short duration enlistment, 2-year enlistment, and when you only went in, I don't know what the durations are now. This was many years ago, Nick, and many years ago. And so going in for 2 years, I had a limited number of options available to me. I wanted to do, the cooler, more special things, but you had to commit twice as long in order to participate in those job specialties. So I was fortunate enough to be able to volunteer for airborne school while I was in basic training, which allowed me to get an assignment in the 82nd Airborne, which was a great place for me. It's Fort Bragg. Fort Bragg is the home of the 82nd Airborne. It's home of Special Forces. It's home of Delta Force. There's no shortage, Nick, of testosterone in Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And it was just, for someone at my age who was really looking to sort of redefine who he was, it was the perfect place. And while I was at Fort Bragg on active duty, I really threw myself into what it meant to be a professional soldier. And while I was there, I had kind of a vocational change of heart. I had originally pursued the military, as I said, for college money. I was looking to get out and get involved in law enforcement. Mm-hmm. And at age 19, I had decided that was going to be the thing for me. Once I was in the military, this place that was going to be sort of a holding area, I really found myself to a certain degree as a professional. And I liked it, and I didn't want to leave. I was actually looking at several longer-term options, and ending up with either pursuing Special Forces or enlisting for a career path that had a shortage in the Special Forces community, and basically just going down the street and doing that for 6 years and seeing where that would take me. Alternatively, I had started taking college courses while I was on active duty. How my supervisors thought that was a good idea, I still don't know, but I was very fortunate that they did. It was a great opportunity. And I also was faced with the prospect of a potential ROTC scholarship, leaving the military, pursuing ROTC, getting commissioned, going back to active duty, and then, filling out my years being an officer, doing the same type of thing that I had been. And for a guy who was married, had a brand new baby, that seemed like the more reasonable option. So that's what I did. I left active duty, started in the fall 1984 at the University of Arizona, and began my time in ROTC. A short-lived time it was, Nick, because a week before finals, or I'm sorry, a day before finals week started, I was injured significantly in a rock climbing accident, to the extent that I was medically processed out of further military duty. I was told, you'll walk again, you're not going to run, you're certainly not going to jump out of any more airplanes. So if we're talking about training, the reason I'm kind of belaboring all of that history, Nick, is that that was kind of the first really big test for me, because people smarter than myself, professionals in the medical community, were presenting me with one particular reality, and yet I was so attached to what I had become, the person I had kind of built myself into while I was on active duty, which was somebody that I'd grown quite fond of. I was proud of that person. I'd worked very hard to become that guy. Yeah. And the first point for anyone listening to this, particularly, we're talking about it in the context of this whole strength psychology concept, is that what do you do when you are faced with something so overwhelmingly not what you had planned? I was confronted with the opposite of what I'd been working towards. And how do you deal with that? What is the right way to deal with that? Of course, I can't speak for anyone else. I can only speak for me. And what was correct or right for me in that case was to not stop, was to try to find some way of rebuilding myself, if you will, into some facsimile of what I had been. And I knew that I was forever changed. I mean, I still deal with the physical implications of that day, December 16th, 1984, which is when the accident took place. So that's already been 30 years now. Yeah. However, because I didn't stop, because I kept at it, despite the fact that it hurt, it was very painful, and it was like 4.5 years before I really had a sense of if I was going to be able to have any sort of physical sense of what I was, in my adult life. And, it worked out. But all along the way, Nick, there was no sense of it working out. There was much more. My body was providing much more negative feedback than positive feedback. You know how it is when you're training, and you know when things are going well. You know when your body feels right. Yeah. It's like, okay, I'm definitely on the right track. All I was getting was a whole bunch of, I'm not on the right track. Yeah. Everything hurts. I'm walking like an old man. I'm having weird pains. I was getting tested for all kinds of strange afflictions because it seemed as though I was exhibiting the symptoms of many of these things, arthritis and whatnot. And I was in my 20s. So then to sort of speed up, because that was only your first question, I'm keeping count. I was able to, in somewhere in the spring of 1989, come to a point where I felt as though I would be a plausible candidate in the field of law enforcement. That first thing that sort of had grabbed my attention and seemed like a noble, challenging way in which to pursue who I was as an adult professional. So I did that, and I spent 12 years in that field. And as far as training is concerned, physical training, it was much the same thing. I was doing everything that I felt was prudent to be as credible, as effective as I could be in the role of law enforcement officer. So that meant I was running, I was lifting weights, I was training in martial arts, I was working my specific police related skills, if you will, shooting and that kind of thing. So for me, all my training, whether it was way back when I was in the military, way back when I was in law enforcement, my years as a bodyguard, roughly 2006 through 2011, everything was very focused on doing what was necessary so that I could do what was necessary, if that makes sense.
That totally makes sense.
So
Yeah.
I didn't have a fun outlet. I wasn't challenging myself in the gym solely for the gym's sake. It wasn't recreational. It wasn't. I would say it wasn't enjoyable, but it wasn't fun. It wasn't that thing I did for fun.
It's purposeful. Yeah.
Yeah, and then all of that sort of got adjusted around 2008. In 2008, I was about halfway through my 5 years or so in the bodyguard profession. And at the time, 46 years old, not a big, I'm still an average size guy, 5'9", 180 something, depending on which way the wind blows. And meanwhile, other people in the profession, younger, a little bigger, stronger. So it just to feel appropriate about the role that I was in, I'm still a student of training, always have been. And it was then, Nick, that I got exposed to what most people refer to as feats of strength.
Mm-hmm.
It was an accidental thing. I had no sense that Mike Gillette would ever be able to do any of that sort of stuff. But I have trained with people, a lot of luminaries, in kind of a one-on-one context, more in the martial arts than anything else over the years. I mean, literally contacting instructors, do you do private training? I'll be over in a week. That kind of thing. And just to get those nuggets from people that you can't really get in a seminar context, you can't get in a classroom. And I had found a guy that I really wanted to do that with, who was a Feats of Strength performer, a gentleman named Dennis Rogers. And Dennis is probably as well known as anyone ever could be in that realm. You're talking about a guy that's been on Letterman and Regis and Oprah, for crying out loud. This guy's, his achievements have taken him around the world multiple times. And I was fascinated by him, Nick, because he's a little smaller than me, a little older than me, and the things that he could do, I had no mental way of wrapping my head around them. They just seemed too impossible. So the question to me is, how does this man train so that his body doesn't simply just break down under the stress? You're talking about the first human to ever bend a crescent wrench in half. How do you do that? A. B, how do you train for that in such a way that it's healthy, or it's not damaging or too damaging over time? Those are the questions that I had for him. So I initially seek this guy out basically for research. Mm-hmm. But it was in the context of spending time around him and subsequently spending time around some of his proteges that I'm exposed to these different things they do. And I absolutely became fascinated with it. I want that. And I wanted that not so much because I need to know if I can bend a horseshoe or not. I've checked off a lot of boxes on my own personal gee whiz list over the years. But at the time, I was living a very isolated life. The bodyguard world is living inside of a very tiny bubble, and this bubble orbits your client. No one sees you, no one hears from you. You're basically invisible. You exist to serve the greater good that is this person. And when you're talking about clients who represent not just a lot of money on their own, but are the heads of ginormous corporations that provide a lot of jobs for tens of thousands of families, making sure that these people are safe and ensuring business continuity is an important thing to do. But I was kind of at a point in my life where that was less compelling to me than it had been previously. I'd sort of worked my way up this odd vocational pinnacle, and it was very quiet up there. And I really was not engaging with the world. And what I found, or what I thought I found through Feats of Strength, was not just a way to show off, but a way to reach people, a platform. Because when you can do things that terrify the average person, you tend to have their attention.
Yeah.
Once you have their attention, then you can say things hopefully of some substance, of some meaning. So that was sort of the last, and that's the phase of training I'm in right now. So it's not about chasing down bad guys and so forth. It's all me. It's all focused on what I can do. It's all focused on trying to get beyond what I can do today. What can I do next week, next month, next year? Because not only am I continuing to develop or attempting to develop myself, Nick, I'm also fighting the clock. I got into this stuff very late in life.
Mm-hmm.
So how does a person who's not bringing anything special, physically speaking, to the table, how does this person continue to make progress and achieve new goals? Because that's what's interesting to me.
Yeah.
I need to achieve new goals for myself, and then I like to share what those things are with other people. Yeah. That is sort of the evolution of my training. That was one question. Do we have time for a second?
I think we have time for a second. We can squeeze one in. Yeah.
Okay.
Basically, you've actually covered a few of the questions already, even there. One of the things that really jumped out at me when you were talking there is how the doctors told you you'd never go beyond walking and do a lot of the stuff that you're doing right now. And that's kind of a recurring theme I've seen with a lot of people who really do display mental toughness, is that they say, okay, yeah, that's great, I'm not listening to you, and they just do their own thing. And I think a lot of doctors are used to dealing with people who are not mentally strong and who basically will just kind of give up and accept the status quo. That's what they see day in and day out. So to really go beyond that, I think is what you brought to the table here, and that's what I find really, really fascinating, is that you can push yourself even just in simple things like recovering from an accident, not just like world record attempts sticking arrows into your neck. That's a whole nother level. But even just for somebody who was told they would never run again to run again and to do some of these things, that's just incredible. That's fascinating to me. And
I appreciate that you picked up on that. I think that there's a lot of perspective layers to that side of things. I think that I don't begrudge any medical professional their professional opinion, because for the average person, the diagnosis would have been 100% correct.
Yeah.
But it's not because I'm exceptional. I wouldn't categorize myself as that. I just knew that I wanted something very badly.
Yeah.
And I wanted it to the extent that the problems associated with getting it were secondary. Problems, variables for me were always subordinate to the bigger thing. And for example, when I heard that I would not jump again, and the reason all of that feedback was very pointed for me is the day that I was injured. That's the end of that day. That same night, I met my orthopedic surgeon, who was going to operate on me, probably a week or so out. And not only was he a very experienced orthopedic surgeon, he had cut his teeth as an orthopedic surgeon in the Army.
Right.
So he knew exactly what a person like me needed to be, where I needed to be physically to to have that life. So he had a very specific point of reference to come from in terms of offering his assessment. One of the reasons why his assessment probably stung more than just some doctor to whom military service would have been an abstraction.
Yeah.
And that part, I mean, I had been in law enforcement. When I hit the academy, I was so well prepared. The first couple days of the academy, all they did was assess everyone physically, and as modestly as I can put this, I crushed everybody.
Yeah.
But it wasn't because I was gifted. It's just because I outworked everybody way in advance. Months out from the academy, I was killing myself on the off chance that I would be in that position. So once I was in that position, I was well prepared for that. And all of that preparation was adequate to carry me through that whole academy experience, so that when it was time to graduate, I took top honors and had the highest test scores, what have you. Again, not because I'm exceptional, but because it mattered to me so much. I had attached a lot of significance just to being the guy to get, this award or that award. I think if anyone else in my class would have applied themselves similarly, they would have done it, but so that led to several years of just being on the job and seemingly doing pretty well. And then in the mid 90s, I'd been on the job about 6 years or so, I encountered a National Guard unit that was an active jump unit.
Mike,
And
I just have to interrupt you for 1 second. My dog is
sure.
barking like a crazy dog, and he's an epileptic dog, so if he has a seizure, then he's in big trouble.
I
So,
don't want that.
Give me 30 seconds here. I'll be right back.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay.
He gets all goofy when he's kenneled and can't see where I'm at, so he's...
No worries. Okay.
So yeah, sorry about that.
Okay. Are we recording?
Yeah, we're good to go.
Okay. All right. So in the mid 90s, I'd been on the job approximately 6 years, and I became aware of a National Guard unit that was on jump status, as it's called.
Mm-hmm.
It was a very small unit, and they had some pretty stiff requirements for getting in. I was 33 years old at the time, which had I got in, I would have been the oldest person in the unit. I was able to get into that unit, and March of 1996, I had my first jump in 11 and a half years from my break in active duty service. There were no parades. It was not an auspicious day for the United States, but for Mike Gillette, that was a really big day.
I can imagine.
Because it was kind of like that last little bit of business that I had to psychologically attend to from a number of years earlier, when I was told I would, not only would I not run, okay, got that taken care of, not jump out of any more airplanes, so I continued to do so, and in a variety of circumstances. So the lesson in all of that is simply to do what you want to do if it's important for you to do that thing. And if I have a talent, it is being able to grab something and hang on to it until I have that something, and until I can do that thing, until I can claim that thing as my own. So when people look at me and you kind of look at the professional history and say, geez, Mike's done a lot of different things, it's because Mike has wanted to do a lot of things. I did not stumble into any of these things. For the most part, they were all the result of some very deliberate decisions and some very purposeful follow through.
Yeah.
And I think that most of us can have similar successes if we simply apply that. You
I
know,
think that's a huge lesson
what
right
is it?
there.
What is it that you want? What are you willing to do to have it? Then do that thing.
Yeah,
Do those things that you're willing to.
yeah. It actually reminds me of a Bob Newhart comedy sketch where he has a patient coming in who's
I can't wait
yeah,
to see where this is going.
yeah, no, this this is very much with psychology, and it's he's playing the role of a psychologist, and he has a patient come in who has an alcohol problem or a drug problem, and his response when they lay out their whole problem and take the whole half hour, he says, "Okay, well, just don't do it anymore." And it's sometimes it's just that simple.
Yeah.
It's obviously with addiction there's a whole different range of things going on, but sometimes for a lot of things it really is just that simple. Either just do it or just don't do it.
Yeah.
Make up your mind and follow through. And that's basically the roundabout way of saying something similar to what you were saying there is you have to follow through.
I think that's pretty apt. I think that the challenge for most people is we are products of our culture,
Mhm.
and for you, those in your audience who are not my age, which is probably most of them, it's more of a challenge because if you grew up post 1970s, if you came of age in the 80s or the 90s, we're talking about generations who don't do difficult well.
Mhm.
Um, those are people that were provided with honorable mention ribbons and everybody's special. And if we keep score during T-ball, then someone's going to get sad.
Yeah.
And all of those ideas come from a thoughtful place, a well-intentioned place, but they do not ultimately produce, in my opinion, people who do things.
Yeah.
Because doing things takes work. Doing things implies potential disappointment.
Yeah.
And disappointment gets us back to, if you can't do difficult, disappointment is going to crush you.
Yeah.
And disappointment is just part of the landscape. It's nothing special.
Yeah, it's actually oddly enough reminds me of a Homer Simpson quote where it's a
You're
trying.
really betraying the depths of your
I get a lot of great stuff from Simpsons,
your
and
culture.
honestly, it's like he says,
Lay it on me, Nick.
he says, trying is the first step towards failure. So the lesson is why try? Never
Yes.
try.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
that's unfortunately it's the attitude that a lot of people have. Is why should I try? Because what if I don't do it right? Then I'll be embarrassed. And it's
Yeah.
like, well, it's embarrassing for you to sit there and just do nothing. That's what I find embarrassing.
Where it should be.
Yeah.
I think that's true. I think that we have, unlike Homer Simpson, I think many of us concoct much more elaborate versions of that same statement.
Mm-hmm.
That sound a little more deep or intellectually refined. But I think at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. I just don't want to be sad, so I'm going to suck at everything.
Yeah, then I won't be setting myself up for disappointment.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it's tragic. Nothing. If you think about the Greatest Generation and how they would just thunder punch society collectively if they heard people talking like that. It's just like, and that's the women.
Yeah.
They wouldn't have that.
Oh yeah.
So it's common. It's a problem. It's not doing anyone any favors. I want to see people reclaim all of that. The internal fortitude, the self-discipline, and just the willingness to put one's self out there. Kind of lay bare your own desires, your dreams, and just go. Just go at them as hard as you can.
Yeah.
And people say, well, what if you never get there? To which I would say, you still are a better person to have made the attempt.
Yeah, and that's actually something I drew from.
And that's something that's under everyone's control.
Absolutely, yeah. And something that I actually read in your course there is it really resonates with me too. Is that you have to learn to enjoy the process, not just the result. and
Yeah.
that's a huge part of it. And I think there are a lot of people who don't quite understand that, but there are a lot of people who do. And these are the people we're talking to right now here. These are the people who
Yeah.
want more of that, who this strength psychology program that you've put together really appeals to, because this is what they know is, in their gut. This is, they know what
Yeah.
works. And yeah, so this is good stuff, and this is, hopefully inspiring to the people who really want to move forward with this. And I do see a lot of younger people who are starting to catch on to this idea. They're not buying into this poor me, everybody
Yeah.
participant gets a ribbon thing. There are a lot of really good people who want to push themselves, and these are the people we're looking to really help. And so what I actually wanted to do too as well is kind of hear some of the feats of strength that you put yourself through, and some of these things that have that huge mental component, not just a physical component. So yeah, if you want to, tell people who are listening some of the things that you've done to really help inspire them to move.
Um, okay. This is this is challenging for me only because don't try this at home. Now we got that out of the way. B, I don't. It's hard for me to sort of categorize what I do. I was introduced to Feats of Strength, but candidly, I don't do a lot of what I refer to as strength specific feats. The things that I hang out with a lot of guys who do, and it's awesome, and I love it. I don't really see myself in that bandwidth so much because those aren't the things that really grab my attention. The things that I like, and the things that I think are perhaps more interesting, and that's simply because fewer people do them. I mean, I can't tell you how many guys I know that can rip a deck of cards, rip a phone book, roll up a frying pan, and that's all cool stuff. I mean, we all like to do it, and it's gee whiz. But the things I do are a little bit different, and they do come from more of a mental place for me. Brett, they're not the type of thing that you really spend a lot of time doing reps of. You either do them or you don't. So here's I do some steel bending. I break some bricks. I do enough, horseshoe, skillet, steel bending to, I guess, call myself a strongman, if you will. I just don't see myself as that. So I do things that involve withstanding impact, withstanding penetration. So, bending length of steel rebar against the throat, breaking arrows against the throat. Where'd I come up with that? I didn't come up with that. I saw Shaolin monks doing it, and I thought, hey, that's really cool.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to try that. So how do you work up to that? You don't. You either do it or you don't. For me, a lot of this stuff is pragmatic. My first public, this is an anecdote. My first public presentation of any feats of strength was March of '09. And I had a very thin repertoire at the time. And one of the things that I saw, some guys do, Power Team is, and all of those spin-off teams are notable for breaking a lot of bricks, lots and lots of bricks. Big dudes, bricks all over the stage, bang, 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 bang. I like that. And ironically, I had spent years in the martial arts. We never touched boards or bricks. We just hurt each other. So I had none of that in my background, in my repertoire. So I actually contacted a guy who I knew did some teaching of others, and I knew that he did some breaking. This is a guy named John Bruni. He lives in Indiana. He's a full-time pastor. He's Guinness Book of World Records, Ripley's Believe It or Not. Really smart guy when it comes to training. He's got a column in Milo, which is probably the most prestigious strength journal on the planet. Anyway, reached out to him and I said, brick breaking, is that something you can teach a guy? And he said, oh, absolutely. And I said, how long? Because the the typical, well, first, you break this, then you break that, and you eventually work up to one brick and then two bricks, and blah blah blah. I don't have time for that. I'm 47 at this point, Nick. And I've got a presentation. I want to break something because it's cool. So they said, a weekend, and I said, you are my kind of guy.
So
So I show up in Indiana, and in a day, I went from being a person who had broken no bricks to a person who had broken 6. I do not advocate that particular approach, but I think in John Bruni's case, he knew who he was dealing with.
Mhm.
And he knew that he had somebody who would do whatever he said, follow his instructions, and B, 100% commitment.
Yeah.
So you know that there are people who can break bricks. So we all intellectually understand that such a thing is possible. And we've probably heard that, well, what they do is, first they hit as hard as they can. B, they're focusing all the way through. I mean, it's just like, baseball.
Mm-hmm.
You don't just stop.
Yeah.
Okay, it's all the way through, just like athletics. But the problem is, you stand in front of that stack of bricks, Nick, and you realize that taking, this, flimsy little collection of bones, mine's particularly flimsy, I have little wrists, and you take that and you swing it and you slam it into a stack of bricks as hard as you can. At some point during that process, your brain is going to, probably the entire point, your brain's going to say, this is insane, right? You know that you're just going to explode all of the bones in your lower extremity, right? So you have to have a way of making that go away.
Yeah.
Of sort of, taking the reality of that situation and parking it elsewhere so that you can actually do the thing. So whatever the thing is that I'm doing, whether it's, getting hit with a 2x2 post or anything of that nature, it's being able to park the physical reality of what it is that I want to do someplace else for the time being. So that is how I was able to break bricks in a matter of hours. Where most people, I mean, it's not sensible under any circumstance, but most people who do that sort of thing have devoted years, perfecting the body mechanics, making sure that they're not, the physics involved are not going to conspire against them and potentially injure them. Have I hurt myself? Sure. Bad? Surprisingly not. People play hockey, people play weekend rugby, they hurt themselves. Bad? Surprisingly not. You just sort of surrender yourself to that experience and you do it, and if it's meaningful for you, you will deal with whatever the the discomfort implications happen to be, because you want to do this thing. So it's even though a lot of the things I do, Nick, are unusual looking, they have much more in common with things that your audience does all the time. You go to the gym. Will it be uncomfortable? Probably. If it's not, I kind of want to see what you're doing. All of your recreational athletes, is that uncomfortable? Probably. So why would you do it? Because to not do it would be more painful. I want to do this thing. For me to give up this thing because it hurts would be more hurtful, if that makes a sense.
Totally makes sense.
So for me, that's it. It's really a question of identifying something I want to do, and then figuring out the best route to that point.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I'm working on right now, while you were attending to your pet, I was getting a text from a gentleman named Chris Ryder. Chris Ryder, in my book, is probably the scariest feats of strength expert that I know. Can literally do it all, and he's a real student of the history of all of that. And he's in the process of fabricating some wrist shackles for me that will be connected by a padlock, because I saw Dennis Rogers break a padlock like that, and it's been on my mind to do for a long time. Now, will that be uncomfortable? Oh my goodness. Will it ever? Yeah.
Yeah.
But I want to do it,
Yeah.
so that's a conversation we're having.
Nice.
I identify what I want to do, and I do it.
And I think one of the key things to bring up too is that you've also perfected how to turn off your brain from telling you shouldn't.
Many people will say that my brain has never actually been turned on, Nick, but I like the way you say it. It sounds a
Yeah.
little better.
No, that's one thing I've found in common with a lot of people who do uncomfortable things is that they know how to tell their brain to shut up, you know, to basically turn off common sense.
Yeah,
I have the same affliction, and for me, it's rather than
no
like
doubt.
bending things, I do a lot of loaded carries, and I do a lot
Yeah.
of long distance hauling of heavy things around on
I've
myself.
seen the stuff you post. You do some
Yeah,
serious loaded carry work. It's
yeah.
awesome.
And
It's
that's
really
that's to
cool.
me that's my idea of fun. Like not just doing something that takes a few seconds. There's nothing wrong with that. But for me, I want to load myself up for like 45 minutes to an hour and just like carry heavy things around. And some of the things I've carried around my neighborhood, I literally am surprised people haven't called the cops. Just because some of this stuff
That's
is just
cool.
so crazy, it's like, okay, this guy's creating a traffic hazard. Luckily, it's a quiet neighborhood.
Yeah.
One of the things I want to do is take a giant tractor tire and flip it for 2 miles around my whole neighborhood. And I just need to get a tire to do it, but that's next on my
Awesome.
list. So yeah,
See, yeah, it's like I've known you my whole life, Nick. I
yeah,
love it.
exactly. Yeah.
The SEALs have a term, and it's that's specific to BUDS training, Hell Week, as
Mm-hmm.
it's called. And for people that don't know, Hell Week is a 5-day period where um, you go nonstop, and that's to put it mildly. And there is an hour and 15 minutes of sleep each, administered at very specific intervals at 4 points during that 5-day period. And they say that by about day 3.5, the candidates that are going to quit, most of them have already quit. The ones that they lose after that, it's just injury. You're so tired you don't know that you're hurt, and so an instructor may have to pull you out of the formation so that you don't damage yourself in a significant way. But there's a term that they use called portholing. Okay, porthole is that little round window
Mm-hmm.
on a ship, and they use that term. You're talking about some of the things that you do in loaded carries for those extended durations. I think this is an apt analogy, because it's like you're looking through this window at yourself doing this thing, but you have found a way to not feel you doing this thing. That will happen later. People always say, Mike, when you do XYZ, doesn't it hurt? And I will say, yes, but not right now.
Yeah.
It hurts later.
Yeah.
I find a place to put that until later.
Yeah. No, that is right on the money, and that's exactly what I experience when I'm doing these things. A lot of these things, it actually really, really hurts for the first 200 to 400 meters, and then there comes a point where you just shut that off and you kind of step outside of that. And I'll go literally like another 2 miles when a lot of people would have quit after the first 100 meters
Mm-hmm.
because I've stepped outside of that point and I'm like, this isn't going to kill me. It's going to hurt. It's not going to feel great. And I'll deal with that later, like you're saying. But right now, I'm just stepping outside of that and I'm just going to do it. And this is going to finish. And usually by the time I'm done, I'm like, my back is shredded. I've got bruises all over myself. And it's, like, I think the last time I did that, I had like a dip belt and I had it loaded with 150 pounds and I did like a man purse thing. So it was over one shoulder and it was like banging against my leg and stuff. And I had bruises all the way up and down my legs. I didn't feel it while I was doing it, but for like a week after, I was like black and blue on my whole side. And it
Mm-hmm.
was, yeah. So that's such a perfect thing, portholing. I love that. That's so true with what I've experienced. Yeah, no, that's seriously, this is like talking to somebody who I've known for years. I feel the same way, man. It's like we are digging into the psychology of it, and that's especially for these extreme things. Like even somebody who just trains in a gym, they do have to learn this to some degree as well. To be that comfortable with being uncomfortable kind of concept.
Right.
And that's the people who enjoy the stuff that we do and want to try some of that stuff themselves. And those are the people who are really we're going after with this strength psychology concept. And um, that actually leads me to a question I did have is a lot of people when they train in the gym, you see them getting really like worked up and like banging their head against the wall and getting really angry. Do you do anything like that, or how do you feel about using that anger or ferociousness to gear up for these stunts? It's a
Um, that's a really good question, and a lot of people have approached me on that topic. Uh, there's two aspects. The first aspect of, do I do anything like that? No, no. Uh, I'm very quiet when I train. Um, I also train by myself. Always train by myself. I'm not interested in training with other people. Um, and I've always managed to find ways to sort of facilitate that, so that I would have access to whatever equipment I wanted at the time, but in a way that allowed me to basically be um, training in a solitary fashion. Um, Now, as I have seen any number of people whip themselves into a frenzy before a like a max effort attempt, or in a competition context, something like that. If that works for them, fantastic. I That's one of the things that can be a bit of a trap for people is to um, I'm going to train like Mike Gillette, or I'm going to train like Nick. Um, that's fine. Try it. See if it works for you. But if it doesn't feel like you, if it doesn't feel like it's getting you where you need to be, and you need to, slap yourself in the face or have your, training partner punch in the stomach, whatever it is, then do that. Feel free to experiment. Um, there certainly is something, I think, kind of primal about picking up heavy objects, doing things that are physically difficult. But the being loud about it is not something that I'm dismissive of. It's just kind of outside of my own frame of reference. It was never that for me. Um, when there's a lot of screaming and yelling in the military, but once I got past the whole, basic training model, then I was in the 82nd. Then I had a guy that I lifted weights with. I had a guy that I ran with. We just did it. We just took care of business. And once I was at Bragg, I sort of internalized the quiet professional mentality. For the now, people that knew me back in the day might, beg to differ. Gillette was running his mouth most of the time, especially when he was training. But in context, I always, to me, felt like the quiet one.
Yeah.
So I think that's just still me. That's something I'd never actually think about. If I'm going to do something that's hard, I just go to where I need to be mentally in order to do that. And it ends up just being kind of a quiet enterprise. But
Yeah,
that's just me.
I'm kind of the same way actually. When I first started training, I saw a lot of people doing that kind of thing, getting all whipped up and stuff, and I tried to do some of that, and I did, and I just kind of gravitated towards the quiet, focused approach rather than wasting all my energy and getting my nervous system all cranked up. It's like there are other ways to internalize that focus and to really focus on what you're doing and, not get freaked out and cranked up. Anybody who wants to do that, I agree, it's totally fine. If that works for you, you might want to try not doing that and see if that makes any difference too.
Yeah.
There's some people who do that simply because they've seen other people doing that right before they do these massive lifts and stuff, and they figure that's what they have to do. But you don't necessarily have to do that. And I've kind of noticed as a lot of people, I've approached this with a few other people, and they've kind of mentioned the same thing: is that as they get more mature in their training, they actually tend to do that less and less, and they tend to focus more
That's
on.
an interesting point. Yeah. I think for me, if I were to, try to, get behind the eyeball, so to speak, I don't typically do things that, even if it's simulated, because when guys are slapping themselves around, I mean, that they're sort of simulating something, whatever that thing is for them. This is kind of frenzy ritual that they engage in. But to me, if anything has the appearance or the sound of being out of control, it's uncomfortable for me. I don't like that, and I think that's probably just because for so many years my training was completely meshed with what my job was at that time, and at no point, professionally speaking, going all the way back from when I entered active duty military reserves in 1982, was being out of control advantageous. You've got to be able to be very deliberate and intentional with your thinking, with your physical self, in order to have maximum success. Because I was never simply thinking about, I hope I can put this squat up. I kind of envy people who the most intense thing they've ever had to worry about is hitting a PR in the deadlift. If you've lived a more serious life, then maybe that's your training reflects that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways it does.
People that can just go to the gym and chill out are probably very lucky people.
Yeah, they're protected by the guys who are doing the serious work, so they can do that kind of thing. It's I have to tell you, I got massive respect for people who serve in the military and in law enforcement. I think it's putting your life on the line like that is just tremendous, and I think all of us have a lot of people to thank for that kind of thing. And sometimes police these days, especially, are getting a bit of a bad rap, and
it's a difficult time for police. They are society's grown-ups in a sense, which means that if the rest of society are teenagers, what do grown-ups do that teenagers don't like? Well, grown-ups are in the bad news business. This is what you can't do. Well, nobody wants to hear that. So eventually you start equating a lot of negative connotations with the bringers of bad news. Well, that's the police. They're all about what people or what subgroups of people cannot do, or why it would be a bad thing. So yeah, it's a challenging time, but doing things that are bigger than oneself, whatever it is that you're doing, Peace Corps, military, law enforcement, social worker, nurse in an ER, if you're serving something bigger than yourself, all of the nonsense, you can find a way to handle that. You can porthole that nonsense, so to speak.
Absolutely. Now, before we finish up, I've got one final thing that I want to ask of you, and that is for people who do want to develop their mental toughness, what is the first or the number one thing that you would train them with? Like, what would you recommend that they start with to develop their own sense of mental toughness?
Well, without kind of skirting into the realm of a sales plug, I think the most important thing to understand is that how things are right now for you, whatever they are right now, they can be different, they can be better. Whatever it is that's scaring you, whatever it is that's keeping you from doing what you want to do, that can be addressed. I think the biggest barrier for almost all of us is the idea, well, this is how things are. And I have spent much of my life knocking down the walls of how things are today so that I can get to a different version of reality tomorrow. Accepting that premise that things can be different is step one. Step two is accepting the premise that you can be the person that makes it different. And then, from there on, it's just all about building your plan on how you're going to make that happen. But until we get comfortable with the idea that things can be different and we can be the person that makes them so, nothing changes.
Yeah, that's a tremendous tectonic shift in mindset for a lot of people. that once they kind of accept that, yes, things can be different, and I can actually be the one making them different, you know, the whole thing, the whole world
Yeah.
just kind of does a 180, and then you
Yeah.
realize you have control over things you didn't think you had control over, and you can.
Very true. Very true. And I guess I would wrap up by saying that this is not, coming from some sort of, happy place, just think positive and it's amazing what can happen. Um, this is someone who has done things. Some of those things went reasonably easily. Some of those things were murderously hard. Some of them took a really long time. But uh, the the reality is, I'm not particularly talented in any other area than being tenacious, which eventually allows me to sort of claw my way past, smarter, faster, more talented people who are just those.
Who aren't as committed.
Because all of those things, talent, intellect, position, can all hit a wall. And if they don't have tenacity in addition to those other attributes, this is it. They have just hit the ceiling, the
Yeah.
proverbial ceiling.
Yeah, no, that's the tenacity. That's huge. That's the foundation that pulls you up from everything. So it's I also want to thank you again, Mike, for coming on and talking with me on this, because this is fascinating stuff to
A
me.
pleasure, Nick.
Yeah.
I love what you do. Your sort of open charter approach to physical training, I think, has got much more in common with the things that I do than some people might initially realize. It reflects a certain mentality, and it's that kind of mentality. And I think that those are probably the people, that you've attracted to you and your audience. And I think I can tell by talking to you that I'm probably talking to a lot of other people that think very much the same way that we do.
Yeah.
And that's cool.
Yeah, no, it's nice to be able to connect with people who, feel the same way about things like we do. And for those who are watching, I would like to definitely highly recommend you pick up a copy of Mike's strength psychology program. Let me just give you the
Look
plug
at
here,
that.
massive plug right here.
Now, it's my understanding that that's a limited edition shirt, and that does not actually come with the package, just so that no one is too disappointed that they can't look quite as happening as you are right now.
Exactly, we need to clarify that. But nobody can look as cool as me
Uh,
in the strength
I
psychology
I
shirt.
appreciate the kind words about the program. We put a lot of time into it, and the team at Critical Bench as well. A lot of really good feedback, and we feel very strongly in its utility, and that it can be a pivotal step in sort of shaking people loose and sort of setting them on the path to where they really should be already. Pursuing great things and making the world a better place.
This is the missing link that a lot of people really need to get. And once you get that missing link, then it's just exponential from there. So
awesome. I like the way you put that.
Absolutely, yeah. And just look down below here. I've got a link to the program. Definitely check it out, read through it, and I would highly recommend you pick up a copy. This stuff is phenomenal. So, Mike, thanks again for coming on, and I will talk to you again soon.
My pleasure, Nick. All right.